Hello everyone, welcome to Drop-In Drawing. My name is Pamela Lawton and I'm a visual artist. Drawing is a tool and a language that I constantly refine and reinvent, using all of the senses, taking inspiration from Sri Lanka, Siena, Egypt, or virtually from here in New York. Today we're going to experiment with light and shadow and connect with an Egyptian temple through drawing. We will explore a method called subtractive drawing, where we'll use an eraser to create the effects of light and pencil to create shadow. Through drawing, we will appreciate different carving methods utilized by the ancient Egyptians. Their goals and ours are similar, to maximize elements of light and shadow. We are going to respond to details of the interior and exterior of an Egyptian temple from around 15 BC. If you've ever been to the Met, you may recall the Temple of Dendur. Its carved reliefs will serve as inspiration for our drawings. Housed now in a light-filled space at the Met, these carved walls initially gleamed through Nubian sunlight. Figures and shapes of the exterior would have been emphasized by shadows created by the sunlight's natural movement. On the outer wall surrounding a side entrance of the temple, undulating cobras wrap around papyrus and lily plants, which symbolize Upper and Lower Egypt. They appear on either side of the door frame. Two winged sun discs are stacked and spread above the doorway. We can also see inside the entrance hall, where there are more carvings. If you look closely, you'll notice the exterior carving is different than the interior carving. They are actually done using two different techniques. On the outer walls, the outlines of the figures are sunk into the background, which created heavy shadows in the strong Nubian light. You can see that the lines create strong contrast between light and dark. A raised relief technique is used on the inner walls. The surrounding area of stone is cut away and the depictions protrude above the plane. Let's take a closer look at the sunk relief technique of the exterior walls. This detail is located to the right of the side door. See how the lines are carved into the stone to form a sunk relief? Here we notice three figures. On the right, the figure, a pharaoh, is facing left, towards the inner sanctuary, whereas the left-hand figure faces the right, towards the outer world. The pharaoh makes offerings, and the god and goddess receive them. The latter two hold ankhs, or symbols of life. Ancient Egyptians combined different viewpoints in their reliefs. This is very apparent in their depiction of the human body. For example, faces are depicted in profile, but eyes can be seen in a frontal view rather than from the side. Looking at the torso, most of it is shown in profile, but both shoulders can be seen from a full frontal view. Both legs are also visible. Now, let's take a closer look at a detail from the interior of the temple. The figure shown here is Pehor, who, along with his brother, Pediasa, is depicted and honored in this temple. A deified mortal, he stands to the right as he faces Isis, who he worships, the seated goddess to whom the temple is dedicated. A frieze of cobras bearing sun discs are above. They are so stylized that they seem abstract. In between the two figures are several columns of hieroglyphic inscriptions. Pahor's face is damaged, and the surface of the stone is distressed. Isis's posture is upright, and she holds a scepter in her left hand. How are the outlines created by these raised relief carvings different than those created by the sunk relief? Squint at the image and imagine the stone in a neutral middle tone, with white for highlights and black for shadows. This will be the tonal range for our drawings. Today we're going to make two drawings. The materials you will need are pencil, paper, a sturdy eraser, a tissue or a rubbing tool. Your hands will also work for that. and a pencil sharpener. I'll be working with 2 erasers, a kneaded eraser and a gum eraser. In our first drawing, we'll draw from the outer wall example as seen in this photograph. I'm only going to draw from a small section of it. Here is the detail I plan to use for my drawing. You can select your own detail, just as if you were in the galleries drawing with us, you would select a view from the vast walls. If the detail you select includes a figure, make sure to take the pose first. This will help you with your drawing. Okay. The first thing we'll do is cover our paper with marks. I'm going to use my whole arm and apply marks using my whole arm and even my whole body when I draw. So I'm going to try drawing in one direction to start with, and then I'll switch directions, but in between I'm going to rub and smear my strokes to blend them into a smoky surface. So let's say our paper looks something like this. Before I apply my second layer, I'm going to smear my first layer. And I really want to get all the grooves merged. And I don't want my motions to be too repetitive, so I can go in all different directions to smear my paper. When I'm done smearing, it might look something like this. And then I'll begin applying the second layer, and I'll go in the opposite direction. I'm using the side of my pencil, and I'm moving my whole arm. And when I'm done applying the second layer and smearing, it'll look something like this. This is a very well blended surface. Now I'm going to go to my detail that I've selected for my exterior drawing, and you can do the same. You can display your own detail when you're ready. And I'm going to use a continuous contour line, but I think I'm going to do that with eraser rather than with pencil. And the reason I'm doing it that way is it's just a little bit easier to redo as I go along. So I have my photo off screen of my exterior detail, and I'm simply going to lay out my composition roughly. And I'm not going to try to be too precise. I'm going to let my line flow. I did work out my composition a little bit. I made some decisions, and I think before you start your drawing, you should do the same. It'll just save you some trouble later, because I really wanted to include both of these figures. You'll see the other one emerging shortly. And for this second figure, I've put them closer together than they really are in the photo. Although not by much, but I did kind of push them together a little. Now I can see my proportions are a little off. So one of the things that's really wonderful about this surface is that it's got an almost chalkboard quality to it. So you can smudge out areas that don't seem right to you, and as I've just done, and then reintroduce a different line in a different proportion. One thing that's going to help me is the grid that appears in the stone blocks. So that line is going to help me with placement, but I'm not going to worry too much about placement. I'm going to do a rough outline, at least to start. And I'm really interested in the drama of this offering. So come to think of it, I think I'll put the other line coming through a little. That'll help too. So I'm going over one of my lines, retracing. Smudging, moving things around, trying to get an acceptable, proportional relationship between the two figures and the offering, which you'll see shortly. This hand over a little bit. I love these wavy lines. Okay, so I've got my rough outlines now. I'm happy with my relationship between the two figures. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in, and I've erased for the simple sunk lines. And now I'm going to notice how some parts are darker, some parts are lighter. See how I'm using the side of my pencil to smudge and smear. But I am thinking about line, but I'm not going to worry too much. I'd rather use the side of my pencil than the point, because for this kind of chalky, smudgy, subtractive drawing technique, it's actually better to make your lines go a little light at first and a little scratchy rather than sharp. That's how I find it. You're going to find your own way of figuring it out. So I'll go in and I'll develop light and shadow. I'm not going to be too shy about all the cracks. I kind of like them. In fact, I think it makes for an interesting surface and an interesting texture. So I can darken for the little crevices and shadows that really aren't about the figure at all, but more about the blocks of stone. And I'm going to think of this drawing in its totality, all the different lights and darks and how things move around. When I say move around, I mean how the eye goes from here to here. So I don't want to get too involved with drawing only one area, but I want to skip around. Now, the first drawing of the exterior wall with the sunk relief technique, I have a couple of examples of finished ones, so I'm going to share both with you. Here's one that I developed quite a lot, and I could even do more, but I'm pretty happy with this one. If anything, well, well, anyway, it's a work in progress. I love smearing my paper from time to time. Even though I did go to some trouble to erase, I can go back and erase again. I can refine. And I have another version from the exterior that I'd like to share with you, although it's a bit, let's see, probably easiest to see it like this. Now you're seeing it sideways, but this is a big kind of blown up detail of the offering and an arm and another arm with another offering. So that's a detail, and this is the top. And I really got very involved in the smudging, the rubbing, the texture of the stone, and the texture of the drawing. Okay, now we're going to start a second drawing, and it's going to be this time inspired by the raised relief technique using responding to the temple's interior. So beginning the same way, you're going to cover your paper just like we did before with marks going more or less in one direction and then in another, and you'll end up with something like this. This one you'll see I have a few more lines visible than in the other example I had. The light in the interior detail is very different than the exterior. So I'm going to respond to the roundness of the form and try to suggest a little bit more volume than in the first one. So I'll start the same way. As I did for the other drawing, I'll do a rough erasing outline. I think I'll establish the grid from the beginning for this one. So I'll just put in, even though this is a shadow in my example, I've put in a highlight just to have as a reference, very light reference for the blocks. Okay, and then I'll start erasing. Again, I have two figures, as you can see from the detail. And I'll roughly lay out the outlines of the figure. Now this time, when I'm erasing, I'm noticing, for example, Isis's shoulder and how it drapes down. And so if you notice, I'm using my eraser in a kind of sideways gesture. Again, I like the softness of going in a cross-contour approach. And I'm just doing a quick, her face is kind of blurry because, as I mentioned earlier in this detail, some of the surface of this detail, the stone is a bit distressed. And I actually chose it because I like that for my drawing. I like to have a feeling of the stone and the texture where the stone kind of breaks. Then I can put in the other figure, the standing figure. Blocking him in roughly. I love his fingers. And he's standing, so I'll do the more of the leg is visible in his figure. Well, at least more close up. And then the rest of it is going to just be some pushing and pulling between the two figures. I think she's a little too far to the left. I'm going to bring her in a bit to the center. So I'll have to move her scepter a little bit over. And I can just use, like I said earlier, I can just rub and blend to create the surface that I want. And take the time you need to develop. It's really, again, a matter of push-pull, but you're responding to the fact that this is raised relief. So I'm going to make the shadow on her leg. I can rub it in the direction I drew it, and I can go across and do a cross contour, build up the light and shadow. Again, as I suggested in the earlier example of the sunk relief, I want to move around the whole object here and there. I don't want to get too caught up in one section. Drawing in one direction, rubbing in another. Of course, I can use my rubbing tool too. I can use my kneaded eraser, which has a slightly different feel. It's softer. And eventually, once I do a lot of erasing and darkening and smearing and thinking of it holistically, this is my example of my second drawing, which is much more animated than the first one, but also much less refined. So that's my response to the light of the interior of the temple and the relationship between the figures. So now what you would do is you take a look at both of your drawings. So I've got this is my second one, and this is my first one, and you can decide which one you're responding more to. And on your own time, if you'd like, you can even create a third drawing combining the interior and the exterior temple. If you're on social media, please share your drawings at #MetSketch so we can all see what you've done. Thank you so much for joining me today. See you next time.